Good morning again, and welcome to the lecture you have been all waiting for. Not because of what will be covered, but because it's the last lecture. So, so congrats that we've all made it through to day 5. Over the last 4 days and the first session today, we have seen and we have heard a lot about the different techniques. Today morning, Dr. Beg spoke to you all about how generative AI can be used for imputation when you have missing data. And over the first 3 days, we saw how radiology and pathology images have been used in conjunction with different kinds of AI models, whether it is more traditional handcrafted machine learning or more advanced deep learning techniques. How can we use these routinely acquired images, these routinely acquired data for developing biomarkers, right? So eventually the goal, at least for the imaging part, is to develop these quantitative imaging biomarkers that can help provide some additional information and holistic characterization about diseases, which a lot of times is not possible just by looking at these images alone. So, what we have slightly touched upon, but what we'll cover in more detail today is the ethical aspect, right? So, a lot of times, and that also holds good for the interpretability and explainability portion of what we covered. Train our models, but we do tend to forget about who the end users are. And if you remember, so this is the theme that we have been constantly trying to put into you, right? Think about who the end users are. Think about who the stakeholders are. And today we'll sort of formalize that, and just to come a full circle, we'll have this lecture on ethics in medical AI. So, recap of what we have been covering so far, and this is not just confined or restricted to the medical imaging domain, but in general to, let's say, any other domain in medicine where AI is being used nowadays or will be used in the future. So, we start with data sourcing. So, in data sourcing, the company or the vendor, the machine learning scientist, the data scientist, we obtain data sets from a healthcare organization to train the machine learning component of the system. Now, the questions that we have to think about and the questions that we have to address here first, how does a company assess the conditions for data use? Next, is the company compliant with data protection rules in the country? And we'll see in the course of the next few slides, the data protection rules are different from one country to another, right? So US has its own rule, EU has its own rule, India also has its own rules. Within that, we need to ask the question if the data set that has been acquired for model training, model validation, if that includes sensitive data, PHI, that responds to special regulatory provisions such as genetic data, for example. So once the data has been sourced, and we have been hearing about how data needs to be pre-processed, annotated, and so on, the next stage is the product development. And this is where the product, the algorithm is developed, it's validated, and it's solidified, right? So by that, what I mean is we need to get that confidence that the model really works, and it's just not the model. So if it's eventually integrated into a UI that's very intuitive, and clinicians are ready to use that. Now, while developing this, we need to ask questions as to if the training data accurately represents the source population, and we have discussed this multiple times. We'll probably touch upon this a few times again in the next few slides. Is it representative of the target population? Does it cover all the possible variability as much as possible? Then can developers explain the logic, how the algorithm works? And it doesn't, by that, I don't mean, can you explain to the clinicians the math behind it? Like they don't need to understand what backpropagation is, right? But you need to tell them what data the model was trained on, where is it making mistakes, and simplify to them how the decision is being made by the model. And then what kind of evidence supports the safety and the efficacy of the device? So finally, after the product has been developed, we come to the deployment stage, and we saw multiple checklists yesterday that we need to consider when deploying a particular model or a particular software in the clinic. So first, have doctors been consulted? The questions that we can ask here, first, if the doctors have been consulted about the introduction of the device in clinical practice. Are the patients informed about the use of the system? So this is very important. I think I was having this discussion with, I don't remember who, but you told me that some of your relatives, they went to an ophthalmologist to get tested, and you could see on the screen that the system actually gave maybe the grade of the disease, if it was diabetic retinopathy or something. But the doctor did not really tell them that there was a system like this, that's there on that machine where the fundus image is taken, right? So this is almost trying. I mean, I'm not saying that they're hiding information. Maybe the doctor thinks that okay, this is okay to not divulge to the patient, but if there is something like this that is being used in clinical practice, the patient should know about it because it is their data that the model is being trained on. Do patients have equitable access to targeted therapies? And this again, this is a little bit of a touchy topic because obviously there's a lot of healthcare is not equitable nowadays, and it's not like we are any close to healthcare being equitable. You have high income places, you have low middle income places where there is a differential, let's say, access to the different healthcare resources that are there. Right? But to the best extent possible, we have to ensure that patients have equitable access to targeted therapies. Now, what monitoring mechanisms are in place to assess the performance of the device in real life testing, in a real life setting? So if you remember, one of the topics that we covered yesterday was once a model has been deployed, you can't just forget about the model. Right? There has to be post-deployment monitoring of how that model is performing, because new data sets will come in, scanners will change, scanners will keep getting better, which means the quality of the image will change. And if the quality of the image changes, then there is bound to be distribution shift. Right? So if there is distribution shift, then it's evident that the model will not work the way it was intended to work. Right? So that means that there has to be continuous monitoring. And one of the questions that was raised yesterday was, can the hospitals, can the clinical end users provide feedback to the vendors, not in just terms of whether, how good, how well the software, how well the AI model is performing, but also send them data regarding, potential false positives or false negatives or corner cases. And is there a provision for the data scientists, for the machine learning engineers to ingest that data into fine tuning, into slightly changing their model, so that now when the new data comes into the hospital, it will work better than how it did previously, right? So these kinds of things have to be taken care of. Now, AI in radiology, ophthalmology, and pathology, we have seen how they support faster and more accurate diagnostics. Up to date, and the figure is a little bit more than this nowadays. FDA has approved more than 1,000 AI-enabled medical devices, and many of them are in imaging. And most of this approval has come about in the last half a decade or so. Right? We are just beginning to scratch the surface of this. And no doubt, medical imaging is improving with the use of AI. So much so that there have been studies that have shown that AI's clinical performance can match or even be better than that of experts. Now, all of this is good. We have great AI models. Some of them are better than experts. Some of them are being used in conjunction with experts to make decisions better, make decisions faster. But bottom line, AI has an ethics problem. Now, as data scientists, as machine learning engineers, we all need to understand the main pillars of AI ethics. Now, you look at these 5 different pillars here. We have fairness and non-harm. We have data protection, human autonomy and control, transparency and explainability. Right? And we have covered transparency and explainability in quite some detail over the past day or so. Now let's talk about the three ethics on the top row. So fairness and non-harm. What does that mean? So what does fairness mean? Anyone?
Non-bias, not biased. Having not biased, the data set should not, the prediction should not be biased depending on the data set.
Okay, and then what are the factors that could cause this bias? So there's a hand there.
So fairness means, I think, the like telling the wrong thing about like false claiming. Uh,
So
so
that's probably non-harm, right? So fairness is it's about bias. So so let's say that there are different representative populations. We should make sure to the best extent possible that the AI model performs equally well. The performance should be equally good or equally bad on all representative populations, right? So that's the fairness aspect. So it should not cause harm. That was your answer. So ideally, or in the best case scenario, not in the best case scenario. So this is what AI models should actually do. They should help improve, let's say, quality of life, right? Which means that there has to be tests done before the models are deployed in the clinic to make sure that there is no harm that comes to the patient because of the deployment of the AI model. And so what comes to mind when you see data protection, which is the second pillar? Anyone?
Privacy of the patient,
Okay,
diagnosis
can
data.
you provide some more detail? What do you mean by that, privacy of the patient?
Privacy is diagnosis kind of thing. What kind of diagnosis?
No. So what do you mean by privacy? So you're saying that data protection means, let's say, protecting the privacy of the patient, right?
Name, his
So
name.
what situations could arise where the privacy of the patient is not maintained?
In the sense, name, age, and those all should not be compromised with other third-party vendors,
Right.
so that they
So
can use that data for other purposes, for mischievous data, for other mischievous things. They
right.
cannot.
What could be some of the mischievous things?
That could be which is harmful to
Yeah.
the patient.
Yeah.
That kind of data, which is very critical for the patient, critical information of the patient, should
Right.
not be shared with any other else.
Right. So
That kind of
just
thing.
right. Yeah. Good. So just think about this, right? So privacy doesn't just mean the name of the patient. Even if your phone number, and it's very critical nowadays, especially in a country like India. If there is leakage of this information, you could have unscrupulous elements getting access to this, and this can lead to a lot of problems. And we have seen this over the last few years. And not just that, it's not just how these unscrupulous elements have access to your data. Even so, think about it. Insurance companies, right? If they have access to this kind of data, which obviously at some point they will, but this can lead to, let's say, them unethically jacking up the prices of their insurance that they sell you, right? Because they know that you have some conditions before you even divulging it to them. Right? So these are the things that we have to be very careful of nowadays. Human autonomy and control. What does that mean? We will come to it in the next slide. Okay. So yeah. So the first point that I want to cover is the autonomy. So patients should know and consent to AI use, because end of the day, it is their life that is at stake, right? So it's actually, it happens at two levels. Is the data being used for testing? If the data is being used for training models, if that is the case, then before they get treated, they should be given a form, whether it is paper or electronic, where they should look at what their data is being used for, right? And only if they consent to it, only then should their data be collected for AI model training or validation. Patients can choose to opt out of it if they want. That is at least that is the flexibility that we have to give to participants in research, right? And a lot of times, patients can be paid for their data. Right? So that is something that is beginning to change nowadays. So I'm sure many of you here who are participating in research with actual clinical subjects, you will have protocols where subjects come in, get their data collected, and you'll have some sort of amount that you pay them, right? If you're collecting their data, if they're spending time, because eventually they're giving you their time, right? So a lot of times that does not happen, but there are protocols in place that should be adhered to when it comes to collecting patient data for model training. So AI should enhance care and outcomes, so no harm, prevent harm by validating AI safety, and we should ensure fair access and performance across the different demographics as much as possible. So now coming to privacy and data protection, there are different rules that have been set in place by the different governing agencies. In the EU, it is GDPR. In the US, it is HIPAA. And a lot of the Indian guidelines actually follows the HIPAA guidelines. There has to be consent and de-identification and secure handling of the data sets when they're collected for research. So we discussed what consent is. So you have to get the consent of patients before you can even use their data for model training or model validation. Now, de-identification. So what do you mean by de-identification? Anyone?
De-identification means from the data we could identify back the individuals of which the data belongs.
Right. So we want to make sure that we take enough precautions so that this does not happen. So we de-identify the data, we strip the data of all identifying information so that when researchers are working on that data, using that data for model training, there is no scope of them going back and identifying who that patient is. Okay? And for privacy reasons, obviously. And secure handling. So secure handling as in, when data is transferred, a lot of times let's say data is being transferred between two hospitals where de-identification is not needed, which means, doctors in hospital B have to know who the patients are that are being treated in hospital A, but the transfer process has to be secure so that nothing, like while the data is being transferred, there is no loss of identifying information, right? So there are, constantly there are being attacks that are, attacks on our servers, right? So, NIT, you have your servers. There will be attacks that are going on every single day. And there are mechanisms that are in place to prevent attacks so that, data is not leaked. Okay, so let me give you an example. So there was this controversy where there was this collaboration between DeepMind and NHS in the UK, where about 1.5 million data samples were shared with DeepMind, but it was later found that de-identification was not done properly. So this obviously led to a lot of litigations, a lot of issues. So these are the things, not just in small places between labs and so on. So Google DeepMind and NHS had this issue. So you can see how much this has been a problem and this can be a problem. Ethics does require clear data governance frameworks, and GDPR, HIPAA, the EU agencies and FDA agencies are actually putting that in place. Let me go into a little bit of more detail regarding what this de-identification problem is and how this can be solved. So what modality is this? X-ray, right? So this is an X-ray scan. So you can see, and this is some viewer. I'm not sure what viewer this is, but this is some viewer that is used in a hospital, and you see there are so many different identifying information here. So first you have the patient name, right? And then you have something called a medical record number. So every patient has some sort of an accession number, some sort of a medical record number. So medical record number is unique. So every patient will have a unique medical record number. Now this medical record number will have different sorts of identifying information associated with it. The date of birth, the exact date of birth of the patient, and the sex of the patient, and you can have, let's say, the place of birth. So you can have so many, the phone numbers. So you can have different kinds of identifying information associated with the medical record number. So that's a very essential piece of information. And then you also have information regarding where the patient was treated, right? So usually in radiology images, so radiology images are saved as DICOM scans, and DICOM scans have something called headers. Okay, So these headers are essentially the metadata that you do not see on these images. Right? So if you open up, if you take DICOM scans, you'll have a lot of DICOM scans that you can download from, let's say, TCIA, the TCIA repository. You open that up on 3D Slicer. You go to, I mean, there'll be some option there. Some of the in one of the drop-down menus, if you look at file information, you'll see these different DICOM headers, and some of these meta information will be name of the patient, which you will not find any on TCIA because it has been de-identified. Maybe you will have some, if they do not want to de-identify the patient sex, you'll see that information, but you'll also have other information like what is the pixel spacing, right? So 1 pixel, is it 1 millimeter in the real world or 1.5 millimeter in the real world, right? So you'll have that information also. And you might have some treatment information, what kind of treatment was given to the patient. So you don't see this information on the image, but when you go to the metadata, you go to the header files, you will find this information available, right? But a lot of times you will actually have this information embedded in the images. So you see this kind of information, semi-upright, portable, L. So this is not meta information that is available in the header file. This is information that has been sort of overlaid on the images. So a lot of times what can happen, and it depends on the software, you can actually have patient name and other identifying information on the images itself. Right? So here semi-upright, portable, L. So these are probably not that important, right? So even if you have information like this, it could be okay. But if you have patient names embedded into the images, that can be a concern, right? So there are multiple ways of de-identifying these, and we should make sure that the metadata should be scraped, and also if there is patient identifying information embedded, burnt onto these images, those should also be removed. Okay, so just food for thought here. So you have, let's say a particular kind of treatment was given to the patient. Okay, so let's say the patient was treated. So we can go back to our immunotherapy example with these lung CT scans. So let's say this is a CT scan, even though this is an X-ray. So let's say this is some scan, and you have the treatment information embedded on this image. And you would think that, okay, this treatment information is probably not PHI, and it's not PHI, right? So we want to know what the treatment was given to the patient so that we can train a model. And you think that, okay, I have de-identified everything, so now I have removed all this information. I don't know what the patient name is, I don't know the age, I don't know the sex, but I have this treatment information that is embedded on the imaging, and I want to use this image for training. Can I do that? Yeah, how many say yes? So some of you say yes, how many say no? Okay, so why should we not do that? Can we pass the mic there? Yes, you with the black jacket, yes. Why should we not train a model that has the treatment information?
Sir, due to privacy concerns, I mean...
So there is no privacy concern, right?
The patient hasn't given the consent yet.
So let's say the patient has given the consent.
So then we can use, yes.
Do you think we can use it if the patient has given consent?
The patient has given.
How many of you think that it can still be used? Yes or no? 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 Can we have the mic here, please? Oh, wait, there. Mic there, yeah.
Yes, I think it's a yes, because
You think
it
it's
can
yes?
improve. Yes.
So yes, it can be used.
If
Okay,
the
why do you think
consent
so?
is given.
Okay, so you say no? Okay, can we have the mic here?
Probably because it can be used for training, so it can alter the training outcome. So the treatment information, if it is having, or maybe like.
So my question is, this treatment information is actually embedded on the imaging. This so whatever treatment TX1, this treatment is there on the image itself. So what problem can it cause?
So like while the model is being trained, this extra information may like misguide the model classifier. So
Yes.
that's the basic issue.
So you have, so this is basically pixel information, right? So if you have pixel information, when a model is being trained, it will start learning from this pixel information on the image, So let's say that we want to distinguish between patients who are responding and non-responding. For some reason, the patients who are responding are given TX1, and for some reason the patient, I mean, not for some reason, so let's say that hypothetically we have images for patients who are responding, and most of the patients have been treated with treatment 1, and there are patients who are not responding, and most of the patients have been treated with treatment 2. Now, instead of identifying differences on the images, it will start picking differences on the treatment, right? So that is something we want to avoid. So that is why if there is text information on the image that can lead to the model picking up some picking on some batch effect, we should remove that information. So we want to make sure that model is learning from actual the medical imaging data rather than the extraneous, the textual data that is embedded on these images. Is that clear? Okay. So, and here's an example of what we do, and this is what I was saying. You have the accession number, you have the study date, that means when the image was acquired. You have, maybe other kinds of description, there's the name, there's, the sex, the date of birth. So there are so many different kinds of information that are there. And how do we change it? So you can have algorithms where you basically remove everything. You see how the left one is a non-de-identified image, and the right one is a de-identified image. So you can see how in the right image we don't really have this information which could potentially alter the way pixel data is learned by the deep learning model. But you obviously have to assign some ID, right? Because eventually we would want to know if the model predicted that this image belongs to category X, who is that patient that was classified as X. So what we do is we assign pseudo IDs. So if the person's ID, the real ID was XYZ, you will have a pseudo ID ABC, right? So then we need to create this list of pseudo IDs, and then that pseudo ID list is what we work with, and we forget about the real IDs. So in fact, this is something that happens all the time when we collaborate with our clinical researchers. They don't give us what the patient's name is. In fact, this is a very good practice. If you, as a researcher, if you get data from the clinicians and you see that there is patient's name, please tell them, okay, can you de-identify this and give us the data without the patient's name? Just, you can have some sort of ID that the clinicians can use to link it. So one belongs to patient one belongs to A, 2 belongs to C. So they can have this list, but you should only get the de-identified data. Okay, this is like, I can't, stress enough the need for this. Okay, now federated learning. We did talk a little bit about what federated learning is. Anyone remembers? What is federated learning, and why are we covering federated learning in this ethics of AI lecture?
In fact, it actually solves the major problem in the medical data, which is the privacy concern. So like most of the clinicians, it's very, in India actually it's very difficult to get the ethical permission for the uses of medical data. So for that case, like what we can do is, instead of shipping the data from the local server of the hospital, we can actually build a local machine which can train on the local data, which is specifically for that location. And then we can put up something like that in multiple locations. And then we can have a server which can aggregate all the local model weights instead of the actual data, which is completely de-identified. And then there is no information, there is no patient information or anything at all. So there is no requirement for the ethical permission from the ethical bodies of that specific country. So there is no violation of rules or anything. So actually it's a very good practice to do. Like it's a kind of we can say that like differential privacy. So we can actually build up on top of this federated learning.
Right. So and the core concept is you train your local models, and you do not, so if you have multiple institutions that are collaborating, you have some centralized server somewhere, and that centralized server is responsible for creating the final model or the final model weights. You don't share it. So one way you could do it is, if you are freely allowed to share data, you would share all the data to a centralized server and do model training there. But we cannot do that because of some ethical concerns. So what we do is we train on our own data at our own site and share the model weights with the centralized server. Now, the centralized server will look at the model weights coming from n different participating sites. It will have some rule based, some sort of aggregation strategy. It will modify the weights given by the different sites and come up with some new weights. It will push the weights back to the site. The sites will retrain the model with the new weights, and the updated weights will go back to the server, and this goes on back and forth till the aggregator is happy. There will be a test set on the aggregator side, right? So till the aggregator is happy that yes, this is where we want to stop, and then the final weights are pushed back to the different sites, right? So you see how we do not share data, but we are still being able to train our model, and also we are not just training the models on our own data, but we are also getting information from other data sets at other places through this weight aggregation, right? So that is what federated learning helps us do. Yes.
Like instead of original images, can we provide that GradCam images or feature maps, like to hide the privacy?
I think that's a very, that's a good question, but that's a very dangerous thing, because I'm sure GradCam images to some extent, like if you, this is actually a very good idea for research, because I'm sure if you take GradCam images, in some way you could identify the nature of the different, the actual underlying distribution of the pixel intensities and the image from GradCam images.
And also we can hide our that privacy thing. Also we can take care of it.
No. What I'm saying is we should not do that.
Okay.
Because there is a chance to get the original image back to some extent from the GradCam images, right? Because GradCam images do have some sort of information of the image, right? Because you'll see that where you have hotspots, where you do not have hotspots, in some sense it will reflect the structure of the image.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So it's what I'm saying is it's not a perfect method. There is a chance of re-identification of the image even if you provide the GradCams.
Okay.
Okay. But yeah, it's a good thing to try out. You should have that as a research problem. You had something like that?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Actually, what we thought is when it comes to the 1D signal, like let's say ECG or EEG, so what we thought is like instead of directly using the ECG or EEG data, so we could try like something, a transformation, like continuous wavelet transform, which transformed into the time frequency domain of the image. Like instead of direct image or the patient information, we could transform it into like one type of image, two-dimensional image, and that data can be used for like this kind of model training instead of direct data. Like because federated learning is more often than not it's costly.
Yeah.
So can we use like a less costliest approach? So we thought about it.
Yeah, so you can do that, and I think that's fine. But I'm not sure. So using the wavelet transforms, if you have your let's say transformed data, is there a chance of getting the original data back? So let's say that you have your wavelet transforms.
Yes.
Okay. Now you want to share the data with me. If I get your wavelet transforms, is there some way I can go back to your data from the wavelet transforms? There is.
Yeah.
Right. You can do an inverse transform.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Yes. Sir.
Right. So it's a similar thing. It's probably easier to even do that with wavelet transforms than with GradCams. So algorithmic bias, I know we keep coming back to this, but this is again important. AI trained on biased data may harm underrepresented groups. Like I said, there will be diseases that are not well represented, or there will be populations that are not well represented. Also, let's say when you look at foundation models might have been trained with common data sets, or let's say more commonly available populations, demographics, but there will be populations that are not well represented. If that is the case, most likely your foundation models won't do well. Now, there are a couple cases, couple interesting studies, and this sort of ties to the this idea, this GradCam idea. So people have been used, and there was a paper that was published where they have detected patient race just from these images, right? And this is interesting. The race was de-identified. There was no information of the race in the data that was used for model training, but they were able to, this paper that was published, you can look it up, they were able to actually identify what the race of the patient was. And if that is the case, then I'm sure in some sense they could even do further digging and identify what some other information was. So these are risks that are there, and it's not always possible to account for this, but there will be situations like this that occur. but we have to make sure that the data is de-identified to the best extent possible. So how do we mitigate biases? Diverse data sets, subgroup analysis. So if you remember, we, like I said a couple days ago, when you look at these clinical journals, they will have information regarding, they'll have a summary table that says, this is the demographics of the population that I'm training and validating my model on. So when you present your results, you should also present how well the model performed on, let's say, demographics A versus demographics B. Did it perform well on males? Did it not perform well on females, right? So these information, what age group does it really do well? What age group does it completely fail? So if you have these insights, you should provide that. And that's not just true when it comes to publishing your papers. When you're developing a product, if a product like this, and today morning we were, Dr. Baig was talking about CGMs, right? So when CGMs are deployed, they do well, they do really well for, let's say, certain groups of patients and do not do well for certain groups of patients. And there was this question regarding where does it not do well? So if there's more fatty tissue or some other condition, if it doesn't do well, when you're developing a product and when the product will be used by end users like patients or the doctors, let them know that if you have a particular demographics, it is likely that the error will be high. Or if you have a particular demographics, if the error will be, somewhat, let's say there's a lot of fluctuation, let them know. Because these are the kinds of data that can make your model better, and it can drive adoption and improve trust. So yeah, so we should have fairness across all populations to the best extent possible. So a lot of times you'll hear this term, black box. So AI, a lot of people will say that AI is black box. They'll say that AI is magic. It's not. It's basically a rule of a set of mathematical rules. But what we should know is that what is leading to this misconception regarding AI is the fact that there is not enough trust in using these models. So what is the black box problem? So it all comes down to the interpretability and the explainability aspect that we have covered. So many of these models lack explainability. So yes, they perform really well, but if we can include some level of interpretability and explainability into how the model is coming up with a particular decision, that will help drive adoption much faster. So clinicians must understand how AI reaches decisions, not the math behind it, like I said, but to some extent, what are the, let's say, core principles that drive the particular decision. This can aid trust, and we should have informed patient consent and regulatory requirements that are taken into account to demand transparency. So this is the GradCam that one of you was talking about. So what this tells you is you have the X-ray image, but on top of that you see this heat map. So this heat map, you see it's a color map where you have red regions, blue regions, yellow regions. So red regions are the regions where you have high attention, and these high attention regions are the ones where the model is learning most of its information from to decide whether this patient maybe has COVID or not, right? So these attention maps have been a very common method to explain how a model makes its decisions. And you can provide these kinds of explainability techniques to clinicians. So even though GradCams are not the best, a lot of times there's a lot of noise, but still it's a pretty good technique when it comes to deep learning and image analysis. Okay, so accountability and liability. Who is responsible for AI-driven errors? We discussed this yesterday. So usually the clinician has to, the clinician retains the ultimate accountability because they are the ones who will be using the systems. And then currently, so even though at times this is unfair on the clinician, so what FDA and EU, what they're trying to do is they're trying to develop these frameworks that have human in the loop oversight. So if a model is making a decision, you have a human in the loop, and then you try to make sure you're doing as much as possible to correct that decision so that the final decision you'll have sort of an equal say that the model also has some liability, it's not just the human. So we need post-market AI monitoring and error tracking. So now, one of the aspects that we haven't discussed so far is professional integrity and conflicts of interest. So just before this session started, I was talking to a few of you, and it's seen that over the last few years, the field of radiology, and I believe it's called radio diagnosis here, you see this sense of fear amongst radiologists or amongst medical students. They don't want to, after their MBBS studies here, they don't want to take up radiology, right? So a lot of this fear stems from the fact that they think models are out to get them, right? That they think that they will be replaced by AI. Right? So that's absolutely not the case. So if you've been if that were to be the case, I think it would have already happened by now, right? So what in fact is happening is, and I was actually telling him that, telling actually a few of you, I was there at RSNA a couple months ago, last month in fact, and the vendor floor, which had companies, startup companies, or even OEMs, original equipment manufacturers, and also more traditional healthcare AI companies, 70 to 80% of the product that they were selling were all AI related. Now, interestingly, radiologists, it's not like they were scared of these products, right? So they go there, they talk to them, they try to understand what that product is, and eventually they want to use these products in the clinic. The reason is they want to make their lives easier, right? There are a lot of mundane tasks that radiologists do, right? Detecting, let's say, chest X-ray scans, a lot of places, the volume of studies are so high that they have to go through hundreds of chest X-ray scans every day. Now, this can lead to physician burnout. So what if you had an AI system that can do an initial level of triaging and then give you, let's say, give you only the pictures, only the images which are, let's say, where there are some where there's high uncertainty that, or there's high certainty that there is some disease or it's a tricky case, right? So it can reduce the effort of radiologists and they can manage their time. So what can happen? So I'm just thinking of a situation here. You have a bunch of images, you have 500 images, AI goes through it and says that out of these 500 images, it's absolutely sure that 400 images, there is no disease. Out of the 100 images that's remaining, maybe 10 images need the attention of radiologists. So what could be done is, those 400 images that do not have disease, it could go to like a junior radiologist, right, who can go through them, and if they find something interesting, they can flag it to a senior radiologist. So eventually the senior radiologist, instead of having to go through all the 500 images, will probably have to go through maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 images, right? So you see how it can help in reducing their workload, and then they can use that time for something more critical. Right? So this is just one example of how AI will change the workflow. So in fact, Jeffrey Hinton probably, I don't know, like about a decade ago, said that radiologists will be out of jobs. In the sense, I mean, he did not in these terms, but he said that AI can replace radiologists. Fast forward 8, 9 years, that's not the case. So what's happening now, and it's a cliche now, that radiologists who use AI will be the ones who will replace radiologists who do not use AI, right? So that's what's happening. So now, why is that a conflict of interest? So let's say that in a hospital you have radiologists, but there is a great product out there that can improve efficiency, that can improve the workflow, that can generate better return on investment, but there is a possibility that they will resist the use of AI in their workflow because they think it will take their job away. So that's a conflict of interest, that they don't want systems like this to be there in the clinic. And not just that, I mean, we can't place all the blame on radiologists, right? So not just that, it's the developers who also have a responsibility. So you'll see, and I was talking to you yesterday about how these demos are done in a way that which shows that they solve all the problems in the world. That's not the case, right? So a lot of times developers may overhype results for gathering funding or for promotion or whatever. So that's ethically wrong, right? So especially in this domain, it's ethically completely unacceptable. So ethics demands that we should balance personal incentives with patient benefit. And the collaboration that goes on between data scientists, between machine learning engineers, and between clinicians it should be done in a way that reduces bias and builds trust. So regulatory frameworks, FDA has an AI ML action plan. So there's a pre-market review of AI devices. The EU has an AI Act, and the MDR requires bias checks, transparency. There's a need for continuous regulatory evolution as the technology develops, and there should be constant audits and clinical validation that is done. And by that, what I mean is you can also have third-party audits. Right? It's not just your internal people doing the checks. You can actually have third-party audits for your AI models. So a couple real-world use cases. We discussed this, how there was this issue where DeepMind and NHS, they collaborated and there was some privacy breach due to opaque data use. But there are examples of successful collaborations. The Mooresfield Eye Hospital and DeepMind had a collaboration. They probably learned from the previous mistakes, and this collaboration actually led to success, and they developed a good explainable AI model. This was, I believe, in the context of ophthalmology. In 2018, we had the first FDA-cleared autonomous AI tool. This was for detecting diabetic retinopathy in primary care. So it has also been shown, and this is a real-world use case where we found bias in dermatology AIs. So in this particular case, there was a training diversity. So researchers, they found that that these AI systems that were developed for melanoma detection, it performed less accurately on images with darker skin, because most likely these models were trained with images that showed lighter skin. Right? So this is another example of how biases can creep in. And if you think about dermatology images, it's very difficult to normalize them. I mean, yes, you could have techniques that can reduce the glare or reflection, but I think it's very difficult to develop something that would take a darker skin and convert it into lighter skin. Because if you do that, the nature of the diseases itself, the tumor or whatever you see, the lesion will change, right? So I'm sure there's a lot of research going on in this space to normalize these images, to standardize these images. So then what are the future directions, and what should be the best practices? These models should be ethical by design. So we should start integrating ethics from the development stage itself. So these are, there are a lot of these emerging frameworks like AI for people. You also have a lot of WHO guidelines which provide developers with these ethical checklists. FDA and EU are working on good machine learning practice guidelines. There should be third-party auditing if possible, and this should become more routine. So independent bodies could certify how the AI models that are being deployed, that are currently in the clinic, how they meet the current standards of bias and transparency, while not just before their use, but also while they're used. So continuous evaluation of this. And this can complement the regulatory approval. So the regulatory approval, once it's done, it's done. But we should have quality checks in place while the model is being deployed. Education and governance. So this is very, very important. So we should have, let's say seminars, or we should have educational events where we teach not just the public, but we also teach the doctors and the stakeholders in the entire workflow how AI can be helpful, where AI can be dangerous, what are the different things that need to be taken care of when training AI models, deploying AI models. So we should make the public, we should make the stakeholders AI literate, right? Unless you do that, it's very difficult to get acceptance from the community. I mean, yes, so now I'm sure after this workshop, after this Gyan course, you have a much better idea about AI systems, hopefully, than what you did previously, right? And this is something that you could potentially convey to other people to reduce their fears of AI usage, or even to let them know that this is where AI can be helpful. And ethics boards. I'm sure you're aware of this, but educational institutions or research institutions have their own ethics boards, right? So when you start a new project, when you, let's say it deals with preclinical models, mouse models, or if you have human data, you have to get it passed, get it approved by the ethics boards, right? And it's actually a very good experience, and I would recommend, if possible, try to be part of the ethics board. Or let's say if you can shadow, like try to see if you can sit on a few of their meetings and see what they're discussing, right? So you will be surprised what are the different factors that they consider that you don't even think about before you start your experiments. Okay, so ethics boards are very, very important before starting any medical related research. So the goal is to have trustworthy, transparent, and build AI systems that are patient-centered. Okay, so to summarize what we saw in the past few slides, so these are the different core principles. We should have transparency and explainability, so basically going from a black box approach to a more glass box approach. Fairness and bias mitigation, if there can be discrimination that is brought about by, let's say, distribution shift by the different populations, we need to address that. Accountability and responsibility, very important. Privacy and data protection, probably the most important thing. Sharing of data, make sure that the appropriate guidelines are followed. So many of you would have tried out Kaggle challenges or other challenges that are out there. And you see that when you download that data set, you won't find any identifying information because someone has gone through that trouble to de-identify it for you and upload that data set, right? And then there should be consistent and continuous human oversight and autonomy. So final recommendation, we should align AI use with bioethics, so autonomy, beneficence, justice, and non-malfeasance. Privacy, bias mitigation, explainability, and accountability are the key to developing and deploying the systems. There should be interdisciplinary collaboration and designs that are patient-centered. Always think about the patients when you develop these models. And ethics and innovation must evolve hand in hand. So now the next 5 to 10 minutes, let's discuss, or let's spend some time discussing about the two papers that would have been circulated yesterday. So I purposefully chose these papers. The first one is on medical imaging. So what are the practical and ethical considerations for Gen AI in medical imaging? And these are really good papers. You should try to go through them if you have time. And the second is ethical considerations of using ChatGPT in healthcare. And this is, I'll come to this in the next slide, actually. So let's try to have a few discussions around some of the topics in the next 2-3 slides. So first question to you all, should AI ever be allowed to communicate directly with patients? So before we go to the answer, have you seen instances of this happening? Were you the one who did it?
No, sir. No. I have
Okay.
seen a case where they tried to get solution for the psychological problem, and then ended up like committing suicide because of the solution that it has given.
Right. Yeah,
so there are such cases. Like in recent times, I have seen like 2-3 such cases. So it is not advisable to directly communicate with AI because there is a chance of committing a mistake.
Yeah.
Even a silliest mistake can lead to human life threatening. So
So excellent point. So over the past few years, there have not past few years, past few days, past few weeks, there have been a lot of instances like this, and you can just look them up where people have lost their lives due to something like this. So and it's not just that. A lot of times, what happens is you can get ChatGPT is not your clinician. You don't provide ChatGPT, even if you provide ChatGPT with as much context as possible, you wouldn't expect that kind of. So what is ChatGPT? It's a large language model that has been trained on a lot of historical data, right? But when a clinician looks at your case, if you remember, the way they diagnose you, it's a very personalized way, right? So they have access to your medical history, which ChatGPT might not, right? They have access to. So when you talk to your clinician, so there's this conversation that's happening between you and your clinician, and they observe this for certain diseases. Obviously, they observe this and they can make a better informed diagnosis. You can't have that with ChatGPT, right? So lot of times, so there's a lot of misinformation that has spread due to ChatGPT. So always try to refrain, like never do it, never communicate with ChatGPT when it comes to getting clinical decisions. So direct to patient AI risks misinformation. So there can be self-diagnosis which is wrong, so self-misdiagnosis, especially when outputs sound confident, but they're wrong. Obviously ChatGPT, the way it has been trained and the way it's designed to give you responses, it sounds as if it's human, but it's not. It's a machine. Both the papers that have been circulated, they will argue, or they have argued, that AI should remain clinician mediated, at least in high stakes clinical contexts, until reliability and accountability are proven. So what does informed consent mean when AI is involved? We did discuss this. So let's talk about Gen AI. So what does informed consent mean when Gen AI is involved?
So informed consent is like, the information that we are using, the conversation that we have with those LLMs, they are again used back to kind of train the models. So that's the consent that they, by default,
yeah, so they should be asking for that consent, right?
Yes,
if
yes.
they are doing that, and they do, but it's there somewhere,
Yes.
right? Yeah. So patients are rarely told when AI drafts reports or summaries. In fact, what I really liked, so I visited it was my primary care physician a couple months ago. So while she was, while we were having these conversations, while she was basically looking at my health history, she told me that, can I have this app on that would record this and then generate these summaries, right? So which is something I really liked, because it's not like she kept her phone there and it was recording our conversations, right? So this is something, so even though that wouldn't really lead to giving a decision or giving a clinical decision, but she probably wanted to do that because eventually she would have to enter that in her system, right? So it would give her some summary. But patients are rarely told when AI drafts reports or summaries, which is wrong. So ethical practice requires disclosure of AI involvement and limitation, and consent models must evolve beyond traditional checkboxes. And this is what systems like ChatGPT or these other LLMs do. So they'll have checkboxes, but I think this should be made front and center. When you fire up a terminal, a good practice is if the developers can say, okay, there is a chance, there is a possibility that your data will be used to training the model. Do you want to switch it off? So that should be there up and center. So if you are developing models like that, try to make that a feature. So can AI be ethically deployed before it is fully understood? And I see a few shake of heads. So I think this is a tricky question, and that's why I wanted to put it up here. It's difficult to answer because understanding the ethical aspects, it can be a very long drawn process. So what I would argue is, yes, we can deploy it, but conditionally, like for certain aspects where we are sure that the ethical parts are taken care of, yes. But if there are aspects of it where ethics can be a big concern, then no. Right? So you've seen that medicine has long used tools without the full mechanistic understanding, right? AI requires operational understanding, known failure modes, monitoring, and rollback mechanisms. We have to be very careful about this. So ethical deployment depends less on interpretability. Yes, interpretability is just one aspect of ethics, but it's not just that. It depends more on the predictable behavior of the system under stress. Okay, so with that, I think we are at the end of our session. We had 12 hopefully very interesting sessions and the hands-on sessions as well. Any questions?
Sir, actually, I have a very random idea. I don't know, like it is good or bad.
Yeah, random ideas are good. Usually
like
good.
Like instead of using that GradCam images, like
you really want to work on this project, don't you?
but I am exploring, so that's why I'm asking. Like instead of that original images, like can you can we generate some prototypes from that original image? And like I'm not saying that like we have to make one prototype per class. At least we can select top 10 positive prototype and top 10 negative prototype. And instead of that, all those original image, can we like provide those prototypes for the central server, or like instead of weights also we can, like, I think we can do it. Like,
Yeah,
I
so
don't know.
you could do that, but what do you have in mind regarding how these prototypes are created?
Like, like instead of like, see, like I can measuring that prototype is a kind of a mean of each and every samples from one class.
Okay.
So like instead of only one prototype, like can we develop some at least like top 10 positive prototype? Positive means you can say like those are the very similar kind of a prototype from the class itself.
Right.
And negative means you can say like feature wise they are very similar, but actually they are not.
Sure. Yeah, we could definitely do something like that. In fact, we had a project that was similar where if you remember the pixel model that we have created for digital pathology images, what we are claiming there in that work is we can generate these images like using Gen AI techniques, using diffusion models. We can sort of create these prototypes, but using diffusion models, and then you can share those rather than share the actual image. So what the diffusion model does is it takes the representations coming from a foundation model, uses that as a condition to create images that obviously share that same condition, but they look different.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So something like that.
So another thing is that like instead of original image, can we develop some synthetic images like using some GAN
Yeah,
like
so that
method
was a
thing?
synthetic image. The
Yeah.
pixel work was a synthetic
Yeah.
image. Yeah.
So like that thing also we can do.
Yeah,
Like
that
like
definitely we
instead
can
of original image, like if you're like using some synthetic images,
Right.
like kind of like those are not part of from original image, but
Correct.
we are.
Yeah.
Then we can use those
Then we
images
can share
for
the data rather
yeah,
than model
yeah.
weights.
So
Yes.
like privacy is also I think
Preserved.
secured also. Yeah. So that's-
Definitely. Yeah, that could be done.
So I mean, the question is in continuation with what he was talking. So during generation of synthetic images, so we are just trying to create the similar images out of the model instead of using the original. So is that ethical?
So what was the question? Is that?
Is the procedure ethical?
So when you talk about, when you ask your question, is the procedure ethical? Is it are you asking if the creation of that image is ethical?
No, yeah, I mean, so creation of the image to share it, right? So is that ethical?
Yeah, so that's the thing, right? So the ethics part of it is that we do not want to share the original image, because the original image might have, let's say, if you remember that paper that I spoke about, that you could potentially trace back the race of the patient. But let's say that we have come up with a good Gen AI method that we can use to create this synthetic image, and we have done sufficient stress testing to show that using the synthetic image you cannot trace back the race of the patient, then we can share that image, right? So we need to know what ethics aspects is being targeted using the methods that we are proposing.
But I mean, if we look at this technically, what we are doing is while generating those AI-based images, although using diffusion or GAN or even any of the vision transformers also we can use. So it's like we are just having a representation, and using that we have created the image, which means technically we can again get back the same representation out of those images.
No, so you cannot. So that's the thing, right? So with these diffusion models, so if you create these synthetic images, you cannot trace back, you cannot go back from the synthetic representations and go back to the real image. So that's why this becomes interesting.
No, so but still we are having the similar representation what we had.
So it's just the representation, right? So the representation will have no information regarding, these no PHI information, right? So that is why this is, I'm not saying that this is the only way, but this is one of the ways that we reduce drastically the chance of re-identification. That's my argument, and that's probably his argument as well.
So I mean, what it looks, I mean, I'm just saying it like it looks like photocopying the image and then sharing it, right?
But that's the thing, right? If you look at, and you can try out our pixel method, that photocopy that you're mentioning is very different. It doesn't even look similar to the real image. I mean, to the image that it was photocopied from. Like there are certain aspects of it, maybe cell layouts or something that are preserved, which means the representation is preserved, but the image itself looks different, right? So when you look at that image, so you take the patient and you take the real image that was collected and the synthetic image. The patient can tell you, okay, this is my real image. I don't want this to be shared. The other image, it's a synthetic image. This was not collected from me. It is okay to share it.
But I mean, don't we actually try to create as much realistic image as we can, right? So that was the
we
motive
do
of
try to create. Yeah, so we do try to retain the realism. That's what you're saying. But it's more than the realism. It's the representation of the disease that we are trying to maintain.
Even in the face generation also we do the similar thing.
Yeah, so face generation, yes, we do the similar thing, but face generation is something that I would say that is more privacy intrusive, right? So if you create a fake image, and if there is even the slightest chance that it certain parts of the face of the fake image look like parts of the face of the real image, you can immediately see it. But when it comes to these medical images, it's not like you look at an image and say what the race of the patient is, but the patient can still say that don't share my real images. I'm just talking about from the sharing perspective, right? So if you have a real image and patient tells you do not want to share my real image, but yes, you can have a protocol where you generate another image and then share that is fine. That's all that I'm talking about here.
Okay, so how does regulations recommend such?
There are no regulations now, so
Okay.
that's something that we have to figure out as we develop these systems.
Okay.
Okay, so thanks everyone.